Let me share with you how to stop working crazy hours at your technology startup while building multiple products at the same time. So we all know working at startups can be quite challenging. So many different priorities, so many work streams, right? Lots and lots of products to be built. And this is a fairly typical experience that the result of this is everybody ends up working crazy hours. It's just the nature of the beast. I think the same is sometimes true at larger organizations. I've experienced that as well. It's just, management pressures, not enough resources, sky is falling, whatever, right? Tech debt, and so on. So, can you find a way out of that chaos? Is there a way for you to somehow optimize the workload, prioritize things better, but just kind of move it in the right direction so that you can at least entertain having a work-life balance, right? Not having to work at night or over the weekend or whatever. So in order to solve that situation, it helps to prioritize the activities within the team. So when I look at that, how to prioritize, I try to find ways to reduce risks, improve the probability of a good outcome, and then find some way to accelerate the deliverable, by all means necessary. And so really, the key to success, to gain that work-life balance out of this chaotic environment is to, when you look at across all the multiple products, is to identify the common components, the shared capabilities, basically the common building blocks that you can focus on first, right? Because you're kind of building that foundation. But the trick is to really only build the bare minimum, just the smallest set of functionality to test that end-to-end solution. And doing it very quickly initially allows the team to build momentum. So then the subsequent iterations, you're just sort of building on top of the results of the first iteration. And yes, the outcomes will not be perfect initially, just because you're gunning it, right? You're working very, very hard just to create that end-to-end solution. That's understood. However, you are actually de-risking the delivery, the success of this, because you're creating that initial framing of an end-to-end solution that you can put in front of the end users to gather feedback. That is phenomenal. And it's also giving the management some sort of confidence that you're moving in the right direction. And as a result of that, they're going to back off a little bit from applying pressure to keep moving things forward, right? The team will also build up self-confidence that, oh, look at what we were able to accomplish in such a short period of time. And the end users are loving it because they get to play with something, right? And they give you feedback. They can shape the product. So if you think about this process, the multiple iterations, with every single iteration, the confidence improves everywhere. And as a result of that, you can pull back on the overtime, you can reduce the stress levels across the team, and sort of can see that you can move towards a work-life balance, or at least consider it. Now, before I dive into the details, for those that don't know me, I'm Philip, an engineering leader sharing practical shortcuts to help you work smarter, not harder in your technology startup. Cool, now we get into the details. So let me show you the 3 different use cases, work streams, where I can demonstrate to you the types of questions to ask to identify the common components, how to think about reducing the scope to create that bare minimum end-to-end solution, and then think about accelerating the deliverable. So with that, the first product is a generative AI-based integration. So think backend API, end-to-end type thing. And then product B is a build recommender, could be another API. Product C is a mobile web application front end to expose the backend recommender API. Okay, so let's dive into product A, generative AI integration. And what I want you to think about are the guiding principles before we really get into the details. So right at the top, you see in green shared capabilities, reduce risk, speed, and bare bones. Those are those ideas, principles you want to apply in terms of analyzing the product. What are the common components? What are the bits and pieces that can be shared with other products? How can I reduce the risk? So which parts, which components are the most risky ones? Which are the least risky ones? And then the speed of execution. How can I make things go fast? How can I accelerate the deliverable? And finally, the bare bones, almost like a Pareto principle 80-20 approach, where you want to focus on the 20% of the work that delivers 80% of the value. So think in terms of the bare minimum, what that needs to happen so that you can actually show the product, right? You can demonstrate the end-to-end solution. So in this case, since it's a generative AI integration, you can see I laid out just examples of components. You have the application UI, you have a report, you have some data sets, a machine learning model, and then the generative AI API integration on the back end. So when you ask what components can be built first to test this end to end, you could work on a data set. Data sets, if they're simple, if you're just mocking the data, then it's relatively easy to do. So maybe the actual trends, maybe you have existing data in the database and you can write a query and produce a view on top of it to simply expose that information. The report can be straightforward as well. Simply connecting it to that view and then exposing the information, adding some search criteria, there you go. And then the bare bones UI. You don't have to start from scratch. You could be using an internal or like a UI development tool like Retool, for example, that allows you to construct a UI interface very rapidly, which I'm minutes. Click, click, and off you go. So just some ideas for the components that can be built first to test the end-to-end solution. You can see that like the interface, a little bit of data, and a report that exposes it gives you that user experience, if you may. Next, which components are shared with other products? You have to ask that question. So when you look at other products, you have to sort of see them all at the same time, right? But when you think about it in general, data sets are a very good starting point. Typically, data sets are used in multiple ways. So anything to do with the data itself, it's a good bet that it can be leveraged elsewhere. APIs can also be thought of the same way, but in this case, data set clearly is the thing that can be leveraged elsewhere. The next question you want to ask is, which components here as part of this product can be simulated? So think of it like a stub, an API, right? You could have an empty contract. You could define the contract, but you could have a solution that just returns like a dummy JSON, right, in response to the request. So you can mock it basically. And then the forecasting trends, that could be another data set. Again, you could just put in some dummy data just to mock it up so that it can be leveraged in the product to show what the forecasted data would look like. The next question is, what can be built in 2 weeks? So this is where it gets tricky, but if you think in terms of the bare minimum, right, the bare bones, like what can I build, how quickly can I spin it up, try to reduce it in time as much as possible. Because remember, one of the ideas there to drive success is to build momentum. You have to make the team and the leadership and everybody else believe that you can move quickly. because as that happens, right, the pressure will back off a little bit, and that will yield the possibility of entertaining work-life balance, pulling back on overtime and all this. Never lose the sight of connecting those dots. You're trying to create momentum. You're trying to showcase something that demonstrates an end-to-end solution as quickly as possible, right? And the last thing here on this one is the identifying risks. So the pieces that can be thought of as the most complex would take the longest amount of time to engineer or just understand the complexity of it. And in this case, the generative AI API integration could be a complex thing. The machine learning model would take time, right? You have to train, you have to create the data set, you have to train the model and so on. And then consumer activity is another data set that may not be available to you just yet. So again, this is an example, but hopefully this gives you an idea. Those questions are the same types of questions you would ask for any product. I'm sure you can add your own. This is just a starting point. So let's move on to the next product. I'll walk you through a similar thing. Product B, just a little bit faster than last time, but basically the same guiding principles, shared capabilities, reduced risk, speed, bare bones, and you're asking the same set of questions just in the context of product B. In this case, it's a recommender API. It has a machine learning model. It has a data search component and some other data set. And here you're asking, again, which components can be built first to test, so you can mock up the API so that it's responding with dummy JSON, which components are needed for the other products. That is the recommender API, where the other data sets that you have here may not be relevant at all. But you need the recommender API because it's needed on another product, right? And then which components can be simulated. Again, just trying to think in terms of what can I mock up to accelerate the development timeline, which products can be built in 2 weeks. So bare bones, minimum, how quickly can I spin it up into existence? And then the risks, well, machine learning model, because it's more complex, it requires data sets and training and everything else. The data sets themselves may simply not exist and so on. You get it. It's the same thing like in product A, the same mindset, the same approach. And now product C, I'll go really, really fast. This is the mobile web application. So same set of questions, same set of guiding principles. Which components can be built first to test, application UI. Again, as I was suggesting before, something like Retool, some other framework to spin up the interface very quickly, API that mocks the responses, and then anything else can be simulated, maybe the data set, just mock up the data. How quickly can you move? As fast as you possibly can, 2 weeks, so you use the tools that allow you to move that fast, and then identify the risks, all the big pieces that are complex in nature. Let me summarize. So here's the set of components that we have identified across all the different products as common, the ones that need to be focused on first. So for product A, we had trends data set and the report. For product B, we had the recommender API. And for product C, we had the bare bones UI and the consumer activity data. So those are the common components across all three different products that should be focused on immediately. And the idea is to do it very, very quickly to build the momentum. But if you put all of these components together, it's enough. It's enough to showcase an end-to-end solution to the end users, put something in front of the leadership to give them some sort of confidence that you're moving in the right direction. And you can see sort of like common sense what emerges here. We have data, we have API, and we have UI, as expected, right? If you're building a system, those are like typical components. Seems obvious, but it's far from it. So how does this help you in achieving that work-life balance, right? Engineers can now work quickly. The map of the common components, right? The focus, you've enabled the team to go really, really fast in that 2-week time period or less, right? You stop the analysis paralysis, and you help the team to start working on the grand vision by taking that first leap, working on that first iteration to create something out of nothing. That's a big deal because the team will see for themselves that as they're assembling all the bits and pieces, they know where they're going, they understand the direction, but they also build up a lot of this inertia and confidence as a result of constructing those pieces quickly and seeing how this is all going to become a real thing, the end-to-end solution. That is very exciting to observe. Next, it's the end users. Oh my God, didn't we just talk about designing this product? And all of a sudden, just a few weeks later, they're looking at something that they get to interact. Okay, granted, maybe it's not fully fleshed out or finished at all, but they get to see what the product is going to look like, and they can give you instant feedback. I don't like this, or I like that. How about this? Have you considered that? That's fantastic, right? That's the best place to be at because you can adjust, right? You have plenty of time and opportunity to adjust. And that brings us to the leadership, the management. They can see the work unfold in front of them. That's the ultimate validation. Team is working, they're building, things are moving, we're gathering feedback. There is a user community, right? The end users providing feedback and getting excited about it. That's a big deal. That's actually the path forward to realize that investment, that return on investment that they made when they wanted this product to be built. So this is a win-win-win scenario for everybody involved. Now, can you see how with every subsequent iteration, as the confidence builds up across the team, like the leadership, the team working on it, and the end users, right? This is the larger team. Can you imagine the leadership backing off a little bit, saying, okay, maybe we don't need to push as hard. Maybe the levels of stress are reduced a little bit. Maybe you don't have to work as much overtime now. Is it possible that work is progressing, right? Things are happening, but you can sort of see that there's a possibility of a work-life balance, right? Because as work is happening and is presented and is engaged, like everybody involved in this, usually what happens is people understand that now we have momentum, now things are working, and they adjust their schedules. They adjust to that, and instead of stressing out and working like crazy, they just make it into like a regularly scheduled programming, if you may. It just becomes a natural thing for everybody to align and continue working hard, but you don't have to go crazy, right? You can just sort of work on it like a regular project and still show progress, still deliver the desired deliverables. So that's it, right? Hopefully I've been able to demonstrate to you a path forward, escaping your startup work hell while working on multiple products and achieving a work-life balance.